Hi, this is Robert Taylor. I have a question. Do all music servers sound the same? A lot of people say you don't need to spend a lot of money on a music server because bits are bits and they should all sound the same. Well, I can tell you that that is not the case. So today I'm reviewing the DeJitter Nook X server. The Nook X is an Intel-based NUC computer. The unit retails for $8,000 and the Nook X starts out life as an ASUS computer with an Intel i7 processor. Looking at it, you can tell it's something different from a stock NUC. This computer has a hardwired umbilical cord going directly to the motherboard, and this other end of this cable plugs into a low noise linear power supply that puts out 15 volts into the computer itself, and the built-in power supply that's already there is not used. The Nook X also has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi disabled for better sound quality. The Nook X is configured to run the Roon Optimized Core Kit, aka ROC. And this is a version of the Roon software that runs on the Linux operating system. This software is designed to run directly on a NUC platform. Also for this review, I received the DeJitter Switch X, and the Switch X retails for $4,000. I was sent two for this review. More about that later. The Switch X, like the Nook X, uses a very large linear low noise power supply, and it also has one built-in Ethernet jack that's for the Wi-Fi access point. I also received the Wi-Fi X from DeJitter as well, and the cost of Wi-Fi X is $4,000. It's based on an Aruba Wi-Fi access point, and this access point is used more for commercial settings than residential. It's used by businesses and government entities because of the encryption and security capabilities that it can provide. I didn't use this much, but I did test it. My entire audio system is hardwired, so I really don't need Wi-Fi for my audio network. As a matter of fact, the only things in my house connected to Wi-Fi are things that don't have Ethernet ports. I'm a big believer in hardwiring everything. And those items that are connected to Wi-Fi are the automation devices, phones, and tablets. To use the Switch X, you have to populate the ports with SFPs or small form factor pluggables. It can accommodate fiber or copper SFPs, so this makes the Switch X very flexible for your networking needs. My network has a fiber media converter from the cable modem directly to the switch in my audio network, and the primary focus of this review will be on the Nook X, but I do have to say that the Switch X component contributed greatly to the sound quality I was getting. Now, when I got these components in my system, I started out with just the Nook X. I wanted to listen to that without the other DeJitter products to get a sense of what the Nook X was doing in my system. And I have to say that the Nook X sounded substantially better than the server I was using as my reference at roughly half the price. The sound is cleaner, the highs are sweeter and more natural. The sound space is bigger, wider, and deeper. The images defined within the sound space are much cleaner and more solid outline of that. The timbre was more natural. The bass was more extended with better articulation. And I also think the Nook X has a lower noise floor, so there was more low-level detail that I was hearing out of the music. Now, I know some people are going to ask this question and say that it's an $8,000 Intel NUC. I can buy a NUC from Amazon or wherever for $400 or $500, $600. Why should I buy this? So to satisfy that question and my own curiosity, I installed the Roon ROC server, which you can download from their website, and installed it on a stock Intel NUC that I have in the house. And I listened to both and compared both and listened for a few days and went back and forth. And I gotta say that the Nook X is substantially better than the stock Nook in every aspect of sound quality. The bass is deeper and better defined. The highs are more natural sounding. There can be a graininess to the stock Nook that's not present in the Nook X. The sound space is wider and deeper with the Nook X, and the images within the soundstage are much sharper and better defined on the Nook X. Vocals on the stock Nook had this persistent sibilance that became annoying very quickly, and I think the noise floor on the Nook is higher than the Nook X, and that obscures some of the low-level detail. So after a few days of comparing the Nook X to the Nook, I wanted to get a feel of what the network switches were doing in my system. So I left the Nook X in my system and I changed out network switches. I took out the audiophile switch that I've been using as a reference and decided to throw in a generic Cisco network switch. Now, as I stated earlier, all the devices on my home network are completely separate from the audio network, so the only thing running this Cisco switch was the audio system. After putting the Cisco switch in and using it for a few days, I noticed that the sound was grainy, had this kind of texture to it. The sound space was smaller. Images within the soundstage were less defined. There was less separation between the performers. Front to back depth was less defined, and it sounded like the musicians were more like two-dimensional cardboard cutouts than three-dimensional beings. The bass wasn't as deep. The highs were edgy sounding, and the dynamics were constricted more. So after listening to this for a few days, I then put a Switch X into my system and connected that directly to my fiber media converter. The Switch X is a 9-port switch, and it has a very large low noise linear power supply like the one for the Nook X. And it also has the very short umbilical cord hardwired to the back directly to the board inside the Switch X. Now on the Switch X, ports 1 through 4 are used for the house side of your network, and that's considered the dirty side. So this isolates the house side from the quieter audio side. Ports 5 through 8 are used for your audio equipment. And port 9, as stated earlier, is strictly for the Wi-Fi access port. And this is actually the only port on the switch that actually has a hardwired built-in RJ45 Ethernet connector. Ports 1 through 8 require SFPs, either copper or fiber. I use one 10 gigabit SFP to connect from my fiber media converter in the basement up to the audio system up on the first floor. And this was connected via 75-foot LC to LC fiber optic cable. The Nook X, my streamer, and NAS are all connected using copper SFPs. I purchased the latest Octave Records release as a DSD 512 download. The album is called Serita's Black Rose Duo, and it's essentially an acoustic album of covers of well-known rock songs from the 70s. This album is basically a band playing live in the studio. The sound is big, warm, and rich. The vocals are upfront and very clear. Serita has a very powerful voice, and she throws a lot of expression into her singing. And when she's not singing, sometimes she's playing the harmonica. The sound stage of this album has all the instruments basically between the two speakers. Nothing too far left or too far right in the sound stage. The dynamics are very good, although the depth is fairly shallow. It sounds like the whole band is essentially sitting fairly close together. On the sound Out the C, the vocals are dead center with the guitar right next to the singer. The bass is to the far left of the guitar and sounds like he's slightly in front of the guitar and singer. In the right speaker, you can hear finger snaps and some other small percussive instruments, and these are in front of all the other instruments, basically right at the right speaker. I recommend this album highly if you want a different take on a lot of kind of classic rock songs. Next, I decided to listen to the Grammy Award-winning album Southern Nights by Sullivan Fortner. Now, this album is a trio, basically piano, bass, drums. The piano basically extends the entire width between the speakers, with the bass player slightly in front of the piano, and the drummer playing his cymbals and other percussions coming out of essentially the right speaker in front of the bass and piano. For 3 instruments, this sounds like a really big wall of sound. On these tracks, you really get a good sense of attack from like the strike of the piano keys and the cymbals, with the drumsticks and the pluck of the bass strings. Sullivan Fortner does some very interesting things with his piano. There are some sounds that I hear on this album, and I've been trying to figure out exactly how he's doing this because I can't mentally picture what he's doing to make some of the sounds that I hear coming out of his piano. The whole album is well recorded and definitely worth a listen to if you like pretty much small jazz combo music. Now this next group is something very strange. This came across my YouTube feed, so this is how I found this. It's a group out of Quebec called Anene Dupant, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. This is a duo consisting of a drummer and a bassist slash guitarist who also works a foot operated sample machine. From looking at the music video that I saw, I would describe it maybe as modal rock. When you look at the video, you see the guitar and the bass, which is one combination instrument, two necks on one body. There's very small spacing on the fretboard. They tend to play very fast and very loud. They get a really big sound considering it's two instruments and samples. So after looking at a couple of their videos, I decided to take a listen to their two albums on Qobuz. I would say the album is, like I described, kind of modal rock, but also say it's kind of a fusion jazz mixed with hard rock. It's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but I do find it interesting. Take a listen. You might find it interesting as well. Since it's only two instruments, both instruments in the soundstage tend to be like right next to each other, and they're on the same lateral plane. They do use some phase tricks to move some of the samples around the sound space left to right and front to back. I gotta say, tonally wise, the guitar never sounds hard or strident. The drums are well recorded. The cymbals have a nice shimmer to them, and on some tracks you can feel the impact of the kick drum at the low end. I have to say that my time with the Nook X along with the Switch X showed me what the importance is of the front end to my DAC really was. I'm beginning to think because of the level of sound quality out of these components, I was really surprised. And it kind of makes me think that what goes into the DAC is just as important as the DAC itself. I think if you're in the market for a server and network switches in this price range, I recommend that you take a listen to these products. You might be surprised at how good the front end to your DAC with streaming can sound. As always, thank you for watching this review. Check out other videos on this YouTube channel. Check out the Absolute Sound magazine. Goodbye for now.